South Australian Voice, the Libs have come out now, and it appears, James, that they are going to say they will repeal this thing if they get back into power in South Australia. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, that does seem to be what they are saying, and good on them. I mean, this is the sort of leadership that we need from Liberal oppositions around the country. You know, people who've been watching this show for the last few weeks know that we've had an awful lot of focus on South Australia, this voice, the repeal legislation. But it all comes, of course, back to this huge bullet that we dodged nationally last year when the people voted overwhelmingly to say we do not want this sort of thing. South Australia still saddled themselves with it. And what happens? Well, of course, it's become this body where very few people have voted for it. There's all these little sinecures attached to it. And all of these groups of people who some got there with no votes at all are going to have the right to make these special representations to Parliament.
Some got there with a total of 6 votes.
Some got
so
there with none.
basically, if you got your immediate family to vote for you, you're in. But I think this is also important to note that both with South Australia and their Voice, and Victoria's got something called the First People's Assembly, where they've had a couple of elections, the turnout has been abysmal, under 10%. So that tells you the Indigenous people themselves, the ones who are eligible to participate in this process and eligible to vote, aren't interested because they're not voting. They're far more likely to vote in state, federal, council elections than they are for these bodies that are dedicated, which tells you it is the activist class who wants this. This isn't something we were lied to throughout the referendum debate about this is led by the Indigenous community. All Indigenous people want this, or the overwhelming majority of them do. Well, no, because when they actually have them at a state level, they don't want to participate in it.
And you're right to point out, Rita, that it is the Indigenous Australians living, working, classic great Australian lives who are completely disinterested in this stuff. They know that big government delivers nothing. They know it's all ideology, left-wing ideology. One of those who was a strong supporter of the Voice, in fact, she claimed to be untethered when she heard the results of the Voice. Untethered. I think that's another word for unhinged, perhaps. There are many synonyms for untethered. Disconnected from reality would be another one. They've picked her as our new Governor-General. I'll be talking about this appropriately in Clown Show later on in the show today. But Sam Mostyn was Albanese's pick for the new Governor-General, James. Your thoughts?
My thoughts? Well, I mean, I've got a few thoughts. I know you'll be covering this a bit later on in the programme, Rob, but let me just say that I think that it is absolutely remarkable that we now essentially have the Governor-General for Human Resources here in this very high office of the land. It's really remarkable to me, a couple of things, though. They've broken the mould of Governor-Generals and now said that essentially this path of going through corporate boardrooms and being involved with diversity efforts and lobbying for political things and being a Labor staffer, this well-worn path, and we all know tons of people in places like Sydney and Melbourne who've done this. You know, this is now not being a general, not a life of public service. This is the way to the highest office of the land, which we honour. And I'll say one last thing. We are heading potentially towards a hung parliament at the next election. The advice of the Governor-General will be crucial. It is absolutely crucial that that office be held by someone who is seen to be above the political fray. And I'm afraid that is not Sam Mostyn.
An advisor to the Teals,
Labor
Rita?
staffer, someone who has been a leftist activist across the board, whether it's global warming, whether it's gender quotas, whether it's the Voice, who has been so political, always on the left. If you want her to be apolitical, then good luck. And the mere fact that upon getting this honour, she wiped her social media footprint. She went to Twitter, or X as we call it, and wiped her account and whatever has been posted there. Obviously, some of those tweets have...
some have surfaced.
And they tell you, you know, she's using hashtags like always was, always will be. She's using hashtags like Invasion Day. This is not someone who is has mainstream, Australian values.